Hi there. Hi. I think I'm live. I'm pretty sure that I'm live right now. And I am streaming through to a few different platforms. So I am really excited to be here. And I'm streaming this to YouTube and to Facebook. And I'm wanting to share with you something that I'm really is dear to my heart, something I'm really excited about. So that's why I'm here. I hope that you are joining me. Maybe grab a friend. I'm going to give a little bit of a presentation of a new program that I'm offering. And I want to share a little bit of the backstory about this program, how it came to be, and what it is, right? So you've probably heard that, latest research shows that we can actually change our brain physically. Like we can physically, structurally change our brain. We can change the neural networks in our brains, which guide our thoughts and how we respond and react in different situations, and really what we think and really guides our lives. Our brains really guide our lives, and our thoughts have a lot to do with really our everything, right? About how good we feel living in our lives and where we're going and where we're headed and just our experience in general. And so there's this there's this understanding that we can actually rewire our brains, that we can literally change the neural networks in our brains so that we're actually living a better life and we don't get stuck in our old stories. And for years, my goal has been like, don't get stuck. Don't get stuck. And one of my favorite teachers, Tara Brach, is a Buddhist teacher and teaches insight meditation with Jack Cornfield, the chicken soup for the soul guy. And one of the things Tara Brach says that really strikes in my heart is that the boundary of our joy is the boundary of what we accept is real and true in our lives. The boundary of our joy is the edge, right, of what we accept as real and true in our lives. And so that means that we can't experience real full joy if we're not willing to really see the truth of our lives and our role and the role of our brain in our lives. That's what that means to me. Not just the truth of like what's really happening, because that's a big piece, right? Like what's happening, and pretty hard to tell what's really happening a lot of the time, right? But just also like our lives, like our beliefs about ourselves and our beliefs about just our beliefs about everything really guide our thoughts and our willingness to actually see. And so I'm going to share a little bit about my personal story, which I don't do too much, but I want to share a little bit because I want you to know how I got to this place, like so interested in rewiring. So, I was the youngest of four and raised in a family where there were a lot of narcissistic traits. My family, there was a lot of trauma. There's kind of a lineage of a lot of trauma, and bless my whole family. And I wish everyone love. But there was a lot of trauma, and so I was raised in an environment where there was a lot of unwillingness to see the truth and the reality of things. And my reality was questioned. I was gaslighted a lot. And I felt really confused a lot. There was a lot of emotional dysregulation. And I didn't always feel safe. I had some folks in my family that um, really suffered and weren't particularly kind with me. I experienced a lot of a variety of ways that I didn't feel safe. And that set up in my brain, and maybe some of you can relate to this, that lack of feeling safe as I was growing, like people that I loved and that were supposed to be safe for me weren't. And so there was like, as I was growing and my brain was developing, what was happening was that I began to equate love and not feeling safe, and that not feeling safe was okay. And so that created a foundation in my brain, that then really guided my thoughts and really guided my life for a very, very long time. And fast forward to just a couple years ago, when I was leaving a relationship that had become very unhealthy for me, I had this realization that, like, the patterns that I was experiencing, the betrayal that I was experiencing in that ending, in that relationship, was like when I took a step back, I realized that it was a kind of betrayal that my brain had habituated to. It had become a habit for me to not feel safe and for me to feel okay with not feeling safe. I'm going to say that again. My brain had become habituated to me not feeling safe and not really feeling worthy of safety, right? Like, ultimately, our brains want to protect us and want to keep us safe. And so, what's really tricky about our brains is that when we're raised in an environment where we don't feel safe, not feeling safe becomes our safety because it's familiar. And our brains really like things that are familiar. And there's an inherent kind of safety feeling in the familiar. Not necessarily in the healthy, but in the familiar. So frustrating, right? Because then we get stuck like repeating these same patterns over and over and over again in our lives. Like I took a big step back and looked at a lot of my love relationships, my partnerships, and there's a lot of the same patterns, the same traits where I was gaslighted, I wasn't, I didn't feel safe for a variety of reasons. I felt confused a lot. I was caretaking a lot. And I was like, dang, and realizing that I had like given up a part of me, given up some of my power and myself to in trade for familiarity and the safety within familiarity. So I had given up part of my power and myself for the familiarity and the safety that comes with familiarity. Like, oh, I recognize this pattern. That's familiar. So there's a safety in that. But really, there wasn't safety in that at all. And when I got deep into like the grief around the betrayal that I was experiencing, that I was feeling, I was like, okay, I do not want to live this again. And it was a very similar betrayal that I had experienced leaving another long term relationship. Like, oh, immediate replacement, immediate, like, just like, oh, wow, what I thought was real wasn't real. And so I decided that the common denominator in all of my problems was me. Like, I'm the common denominator and I'm the only thing that I can change. And so I was fortunate that I have been practicing yoga, like deep yoga practices, mantras, and meditation for a very long time. And so I reinvigorated my meditation practice. I studied a lot about some toxic relationship patterns and some toxic human patterns, and could recognize some of them in myself, but also really recognizing like, oh, there's these patterns that I have found safety in because they were familiar. And I don't want to find safety in those patterns anymore because it's painful. It's painful to not truly be safe with someone who is supposed to be your most safe person. And then I started to look at other parts of my life where I was not really living my full radiance or my full expression of myself, because deep in my core, there was this sense of unworthiness. And that was a message I got from very early on, was that my needs and my I wasn't worthy of feeling safe and being uplifted, right? And so uh, it became like there was this huge aha. I woke up out of a big trance a couple of years ago. This happened like COVID time, like really spending a lot of time alone, really able to go in deep and practice and really unlock my brain and see, oh, here's red flags that I pass by with friends, with coworkers, with partners, because there was that safety in the familiar, right? So I went in. I was like, I want to weed this out. I had broken out of this huge cognitive dissonance in my brain. And cognitive dissonance is when there's like two really disparaging or two very different um, beliefs or experiences going on at the same time, right? And one would be like feeling safe with someone or like but not really seeing the red flags, or feeling confused but not really seeing the whole picture. And so I woke up out of this cognitive dissonance and some trauma bonds that I had with some folks and realized I don't want to live like that anymore. I don't want to repeat the same patterns. I am fine to be single the rest of my life if it means that I don't have to live these patterns anymore. But really, what I want to do is go into my own brain and weed out, unhook, dig out those belief systems that led me to saying yes to situations that ultimately were not healthy for me. And isn't that like the crux of being human? Like, isn't that what we all want to do? We want to be able to wake up to our own patterns, right? So it was my pattern of unworthiness, my pattern of like not being really kind to myself and really deeply loving myself in a way so that I could really live the fullness and of joy of my life. And so I went in, I took all of the 30 some years of studying yoga, 18 years of studying mantras and chanting mantra and pranayam and mudras and some physical yoga, but really more, yoga is um, the Yoga Sutras begin with, yoga is the stopping of the turning of the mind. And really, yoga, the fullness of yoga practice is a way of freeing one's mind. And so, chanting, mudra, meditation, all these practices, even the physical asanas, is a piece of freeing the mind so that we can live our full radiance, so that we can live our fullest expression of ourselves, participate in contribution to the world, contribute to our community, contribute and participate with our family and our beloveds and our friends and ourselves, like really show up for ourselves as well. And what happens, and I've been a body worker for a really long time, like 30 years. And what I see is that people who are in chronic pain or chronic suffering, at the root of that is mental anguish and mental suffering. They've cordoned off parts of their bodies where they're not willing to see reality as it is. And so or their nervous system was like, whoa, that was too crazy or that was too scary. I'm going to tuck that into my butt and I'm going to clench my right butt cheek for the next 60 years around that memory or around that experience, right? So it became my very dedicated focus to learn how to use the practices of yoga to rewire my brain out of the things that I was doing to create my own suffering in my life and to keep me limited from being the fullest expression of myself. So that's mantras, that's mudras, that's meditation every morning for 1 to 2 hours a day, which it doesn't have to be that actually. Um, and so the practices of yoga, that shifting, that turning of the mind, and the turning is like we can't even see the truth of reality. We can't even see the truth of what it is when our minds are turned. And every difficult situation, every scary situation, everything that brings up protection in our nervous system becomes a turn in the mind. And I liken it to like a mirror gets laid down in the brain, and then we have another hurt, pshoo, another mirror gets laid down. We have another hurt, chow, there's another one, pshoo, chow. Like all these mirrors get laid down inside our brains. And then um, it's like our own game of telephone going on inside our heads. It's like our own freaking game of telephone going on inside our heads, so that we're like going through this experience. Information comes into our brain, it hits all those little mirrors, doot 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 doot, like get little game of pinball, bing 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 bing, ding 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 ding. And then what comes out is something completely different than what came in. It's crazy making. Like our brains are kind of intense and can't always be trusted. Our brains can't always be trusted because we're going to often see things in the worst light, in the worst case scenario, because our brain's number one job is to protect us, is to keep the organism alive at all costs, at all costs. And sometimes the costs are self worth, self kindness, true safety, real love, trust, and surrounding oneself with people that are really trustworthy. And sometimes the cost is we don't act so good, and so we lose really good people in our lives, perhaps because we're just flipping our lid and freaking out all the time. And I'm going to pause a minute and see. Seems like I'm live. I don't know if I am or not. I'm going to take a moment to see. um, Looks like, yeah. So in this process that I've been in this miraculous healing chrysalis that I've been in, I was able to put together like all my years of working in people's bodies and like learning about what happens to us physically when we're triggered, when we're upset, when we close off parts of ourselves around traumatic or scary or difficult experiences. And kind of merging that, I've continued studying. Like, I'm a trauma informed yoga therapist. I've been teaching yoga and meditation, mantra chanting, and sacred practices for many, many years. But then also marrying it with the sacred practices with the physical as well. And I completed a training called the somatic trauma therapy, integrative somatic trauma therapy training, which was really fascinating and so amazing to see how our brains show up to protect us, to want to care for us, to want to hold us, but they're just sometimes kind of like a Neanderthal inside our bodies going, I've got to protect this human, at all costs. And one of those costs could also be like lots of mirrors inside the brain. And I remember at one point being like I was inside myself looking out, going, I just know there's a better way. Like, I know there's a better way of living. It just can't be this difficult. It can't be this dramatic. It can't be this hard, this much struggle, this much confusion. Like, confusion is, just so you know, confusion is a sign that you're being manipulated. Because if you're going like, why would you do that, or why would you say that, or why would you act that way, like It's a sign that you're being manipulated. And then what ends up happening often in that kind of scenario is that then whoever is like confusing you might jump in and like shower you with affection, kind of love bomb you to bring you back into that interplay, you know. I got really sick and tired of that cycle. And the only thing that we can change is our own minds. And so I became really diligent about I want to live the second half of my life in radiant glory. I do not want to live the second half of my life confused and wondering and in a state of lack and in a state of unworthiness or in a state of caretaking someone else, right? I don't want to do that anymore. And so I went in and merged these practices, and it turns out that yoga is like the most amazing thing, right? It's the stopping of the turning of the mind. Yoga is the stopping of the turning of the mind. And so, all the practices, the deeper soul practices of yoga, actually are the perfect things to rewire your brain, right? Neuroplasticity is real. I am a living true example. And it's so possible and so doable. And it doesn't have to take a lot of time a day. So if you want to stick around for a few more minutes, I am going to share a presentation, um, a presentation that I'm pretty excited about. This um, this thing. So first, I'm going to just talk to you just a little bit. Here's a little elementary picture of your brain, and I want you to really notice the amygdala, that tiny little spot right in the center of the brain. That's your little Neanderthal going, is it safe? You know, am I in danger? Are we going to die? Right? Don't die, don't die. And the thing is, the amygdala is like always on and it's always recording everything and it's surrounded by your memory centers. And the amygdala is looking for danger and it's surrounded by your memory centers. So it's recording every experience of your life. And when there's a little bit of danger, a little bit of scare, a little bit of arousal or activation in your nervous system, the amygdala is like, bah, and it's what triggers that activation. And then it remembers every bit of what happened to trigger that activation. And then it stores it in your body. And then you kind of contract around it or get stuck around it. And then the amygdala is always looking for danger. It always is. So it can't always be trusted because sometimes the amygdala is going to go, hey, this situation here is kind of like another situation where I was scared or when I wasn't totally safe. So I'm going to set off the alarms and protect the organism. So the amygdala can become really overreactive. And so we become overreactive, but it's really our brains, it's a biological response. So this might be helpful to understand because it's biology, right? It's not you or me just freaking out like it is and it isn't, right? The thing is we can temper it and we can control it. So that's really cool, right? That's really cool. Um, and so then we also have, I want to share this little bit because there's this study that Harvard did about meditation, the effects of meditation and gray matter in the brain. And gray matter, the more gray matter you have around an area, the faster the signals get sent, basically. And so what happened was that the higher brain, when folks meditated for just as little as 20 minutes a day, and I'm going to tell you, meditation is not what you think. So stick with me here. When you meditate or guide your thoughts, calm your nervous system for about 20 minutes a day is all it takes. After 6, 8 weeks, the gray matter around your higher brain significantly increases, which means that the gray matter around your brain, like your brain, your higher brain is much more functional. So emotional regulation is better. You're able to learn. Your creative juices turn on. You're like, yes, I'm so like it's like yes, you're in love with life. Like it's all um, things can be exciting in a good way. You can be more creative. You can problem solve. You can think clearly. You can make decisions clearly. All that's higher brain stuff. And so when you just do a little bit of meditation every day, and it can be guided meditation, and I'm going to get to that part in a minute, then what can happen is like your higher brain turns up and things are all just work a little better. But here's the other thing that's so cool about this Harvard study is that what also happens is that the amygdala shuts down. What? The amygdala, like the gray matter around this amygdala significantly decreases. Ooh. And so when the gray matter around the amygdala decreases, it means you're less hypervigilant. It means that you're not as like, oh my God, all of this is crazy and blah, blah, and not hyper reactive, overreactive. The amygdala gets kind of tucked in and the gray matter reduces just with some consistent meditation practice. And so my experience is that right around that 6, 8 week mark, my brain really softened. My reactivity really softened. Things really changed. And I was doing some very particular practices to rewire my brain so that I wasn't stuck in the old stories because that's always been my goal to not be stuck. And this couple years ago, when I took a big step back, I was like, oh, there's a bigger picture here. There's a bigger overarching pattern here that I need to unhook from. I need to get inside my brain and unhook some of that stuff. I need to weed my mental garden. And so I use mantra and I use mudra to stabilize my nervous system. I used a lot of self kindness and like listening. I processed my grief. Oh, so much grief, and grief does come and go, but I learned to like ride it well and not stuff it, right? Another thing Tara Brach says is when we bury our feelings, we bury them alive. When we bury our feelings, we bury them alive. That's a big deal, right? Because they're in there, they're going to crawl out, right? So just for our mental, our sanity, we need to be able to dance in and go into those places where our suffering lives so that we're not forever hooked to them in a way that creates like really detrimental patterns. This is how early childhood traumas can keep playing out for our whole lives, right? So the beauty of this is that with neuroplasticity and that understanding, and then looking at all these studies and going, oh, actually, the yogis have been doing it right for thousands of years. Turns out oming is really powerful. Turns out chanting mantras of all different kinds is really powerful. And we can use really specific meditations to actually heal from those old wounds and detach our brains from those old wounds and that old wounding so that we can live our best lives, right? Isn't that the goal? To live our best lives. So that was my goal, and now I feel such a deep connection with myself. And I danced around that for a long time, but I really needed to see this bigger picture of this whole pattern and go, oh, ah, okay. And what is it in me that continues to attract this pattern? And how can I weed that out of my mental garden? And what can I plant instead? And so it's from that experience and many, many years of doing these practices and that willingness to see inside the truth of myself, which is radiant and glorious, but the truth of the parts of me that were covering that radiant glory, and to kind of and clear out those layers around that radiant glory so that I could live a better life. And then I've taken all of those practices and created a program that's called the Nest. The Nest. And that's the neural emotional stability training. And that's what it is. It's like guided practices for 20, 30 minutes a day. You could do minimum of like mantra chanting and chanting to Ganesha and really clearly setting your intention, creating clear visual of your compelling future, because if you don't have a visual of your compelling future, there's no point. What's the point of the work? What's the point of life, right? If you don't have a compelling future. And so really discovering like what is that compelling future? And then really dumping all the toxic old patterns that keep us bound to our lower chakra energies, where we're just like, um, just trying to feel safe and maybe giving up our real safety for the safety of familiarity. Oh, it's so good. It's so important to not give up our real safety for the safety of familiarity. The motorcycle right outside. So I am going to switch back because I want to show you a little bit more on this PowerPoint. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to that PowerPoint and I'm going to show you share screen. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So we're going to give this a go. Okay, great. There it is. And I'm going to go back to this. So I want to tell you about the Nest. So the Nest is this program that I created, the Neural Emotional Stability Training, and it's really about how to rewire your brain from old pain to new joy. Rewire your brain from old pain to new joy. And it's all these yoga practices to uproot the seeds of suffering and plant new thought patterns to create the life you desire, a life of calm, grace, and joy. And when you rewire your brain, the things that used to upset you don't upset you anymore. You heal shame and nurture worthiness. That's such a big piece. Heal shame and nurture worthiness. You hold clearer boundaries. Your creative power turns up. You make better decisions. Your relationships are sweeter. Intimacy is deeper on all levels. Communication is easier. You sleep better. You heal more quickly. And so it's 6.5 weeks. It's a 6.5 week, 45-day program where you're going to be guided step by step in a sacred yoga based program that will weed out thoughts and beliefs that cause you suffering and plant new seeds for joy and love. And you're going to learn how to cut away old neural networks that create pain in your life. Like, how do you stop ruminating about the old shit in your life and get on board with a new vision and a new creative power within yourself? And so the Nest, there's these 6 weeks of grounding, raising the energy, unveiling the radiant heart, drawing in the highest light, attracting the good, and living your best life. And so here's the thing is that you really can do this. You really can do this. And so I'm going to pull up, I want to talk to you about it. I want to be able to look at in your eyes ish, right? Through a camera, to look in your eyes so that you can really see the truth of what I'm saying is the truth from my heart. And this is my practice. This is what I'm offering as a program that is my living practice. And a lot of folks have said to me, "Oh, but you're successful and you've had such a good life." I'm like, "Who are you?" I have worked really, really hard, and I really could be like in a corner biting people. Like I've had a lot of traumatic experiences and for long periods of time in my life. And I worked really hard to get to this place where I can smile easily and feel joy and also trust. Like, it takes a while to rebuild trust when you've lost it, when you've had some deep betrayal, right? And so this program is this like 6.5 weeks. The first bunch of weeks is like, how do you use the first bunch of days, like, how do you use your mala? How do you set up sacred space? How do you like prepare the container? Right. And then the first week is grounding. We're like just getting grounded. We're going to stabilize the root center. We're going to dig up those old seeds of suffering and create our new vision together. We're going to connect to the crown chakra. You're going to learn the Ganesha root mantra. And Ganesha is like known as the remover of obstacles and the leader of the troops. We're going to call in that energy of like really gathering the forces. He's Ganapati, the leader of the troops, the general, who's we're going to be like, okay, Ganesha, come on, bring all these troops in. I got some work to do. I have big work to do, and I'm going to call in your help. And then we're going to do some Shakti Bija mantras, and that first is just like stabilizing the lowest center and grounding in the practice and like beginning that visualization, starting to dig up those old seeds. Like, what are the beliefs that are causing your suffering? How do you identify those? And then how do you pull them up, right? And then once we're grounded and clearer in the lower chakras, then we can start pulling the energy up. And we're going to do very specific targeted mantra that pulls the energy up from root to crown, and like in this flowing experience of energy, and we're gonna like not be stuck in those negative patterns of hatred and anger and unworthiness. And I want to say, like, there's an element of anger that is righteous and real and true for a period of time. Anger shows you what you won't accept and where your boundaries need to be. So yes, be angry, but then at some point, just long enough so that it shows you, like, actually, I'm not going to put up with this shit. And so that you can move on. And then, but you need to know, like, how do I create a boundary? How do I hold a boundary well around myself? Because if you've had some of the experiences or similar experiences in your early childhood that I had, things that maybe made you not trust yourself enough to hold really good boundaries. We're going to clear our central channel. We're going to release shame and guilt. And we're going to learn how to stop ruminating about the crappy old stories, because it's easy to get stuck in rumination, right? And ruminating is thinking over and over and over again about something that, and then it just keeps you stuck in your suffering. It's about crappy old stories. And then the third week, we're like unveiling the radiant heart. We're like really opening, because there might be a lot of grief around your heart. And believe me, I know grief. And so, how do we learn how to trust again? How do we open up? How do we break those chains around our hearts? And how do we forgive and not feel like somebody's getting away with it? Like, whatever, So, releasing anger, releasing shame, releasing guilt, releasing and being okay with grief and letting it move through us instead of trying to shove it away. We don't have a really good way to process grief in our culture. And so we end up kind of really closing off our heart and trying to protect around those feelings. So we're going to do guided meditations, and there's going to be teachings every week, and every single day there's guided meditation to follow, all recorded and all taken care of. So you don't even have to, you can meditate for 20-30 minutes a day and just follow a guided meditation. That counts. You don't have to figure it out by yourself. It's all guided. And then in the fourth week, we're going to like draw in the highest light. We're going to get every cell in our body radiating with that light. Healing happens. Like, we're connecting. We're going to fully activate our crown chakra. It's like beautiful. You're going to be like, oh my God, this is amazing. Right? And then the fifth week, we're like attracting the good. And we start looking at that boundary that we created. And can it be a little more permeable? Can we feel safe enough? We're going to cultivate that sense of safety within ourselves so that we can feel in a way uh, okay to like let a little more in, right? But still clear in the boundaries, like this is what I don't accept, but also this is what I do, right? And then the last week 6 is like really putting it all together. And we're going to end with a fire ceremony. If you're here in Asheville, you can join me. We're going to have a fire ceremony. We're going to burn everything and also bring to light. So we're burning what doesn't serve us. And then we're bringing to light what does. And so all of this happens through weekly, like everything is pre-recorded and on a portal. And there's even yoga asana, but you don't have to do that really. There's some deep releases of the psoas and in the belly, and you're going to get a little soft ball to do that work in yourself because that can trigger anxiety. And I teach a program called Overcoming Anxiety, and some of those pieces are in this training to help us to feel more calm, stabilize our nervous system. And these practices are the practices that I use with people who have extreme stress and anxiety and panic disorder and help them to get themselves um, more grounded and steady and stable. So 6.5 weeks. Holy crap, so excited about it. And it is changing your brain structurally, literally doing away with the old neural networks and replacing it with neural networks that allow you true happiness and true joy in your life. So I am super excited to introduce you to this program. And the last thing that I want to share with you is a little bit about it. Right. So the program, this is the first time I'm running this program like this. And so normally this program is going to be $14.97, and it's going to be like half of that price for this time, this first time running through. You get a gift box with like a mala and a candle and a little Ganesha and all the things you need, a journal, the ball, everything that you need. And then we're going to start April 3rd, like it's coming up next Sunday, a week from Sunday. We're going to start and we're going to do 2 Zooms in a row, Sunday and Monday, and then we're going to meet every Monday for 6 weeks, and we're going to end on a Wednesday at 6.5 weeks, so that we can really be together during this process. Everything's recorded online, held for you in a portal. And then we're live once a week for teachings and practice together. And then also we are, you're going to be paired up with someone who can be your like a little support person. You can help each other, just kind of hear each other. And here's the thing, I want to make it really clear. This is not a replacement for therapy. I am not a therapist. I'm not a psychotherapist at all. Yes, I've studied a lot of trauma work. Yes, I've studied a lot about the brain. Yes, I've studied a lot of those things. And I'm not a therapist. What I am is a practicing yogi who has transformed my brain and my life with these practices. This is my practice. This I know works. And I've used a lot of these practices to support others in their work as well. So I'm going to put in the comments or drop in here in the description a link to the page if you want to look into the nest. I'm really excited. I got a bunch of people registered and ready to go already. And I wanted to offer this out to this greater community because it's really time for us to take our lives in our own hands and to reclaim our brains. I don't know about you, but I was trained like to not believe in myself. I was trained to not, even fully believe my reality, right? And this is a reclaiming of that. We're going to do soul retrieval work. We are like calling ourselves back to ourselves in fullness and wholeness so that we can really live that glorious radiance that we're meant to live. So starts next Sunday. Jump on board. Feel free to email me with any questions, info at freebodynow.com. I'll put that in the whatever also in the comments or in the description. Info at freebodynow.com. You can check that out. Feel free to ask any questions. It's going to be powerful. It is a powerful practice. It's not messing around, truly reshaping your brain and your thoughts because your thoughts are powerful. They are what shape your life. Your thoughts shape your life. And I want to help you change your brain so that your thoughts are actually supporting the goodness that you are. So, blessings and best wishes. Kat Matlock here at FreeBody. I'm so excited about this program. Email me with any questions, and I hope to see you in the nest. Take care. Neural, emotional stability training. That's it.